Okay, let's go ahead and get started. My name is Juliana Burkhoff. I work with Ag Innovations. We've been working with the Department of Water Resources on environmental justice input and reaching out to people in the Delta on the Delta Conveyance Project. This is the Community Benefits Program Case Study Workshop. This workshop is being presented in Spanish and English. You see here how to choose a Spanish channel. Go to the bottom of your Zoom page and you'll see a place where you can choose English and Spanish interpretation. Choose whichever you want, English or Spanish, and you'll be sent into that interpretation channel. Those of you who want the information in Spanish, you go to the Department of Water Resources webpage and you'll see the Community Benefits Program. Click on the Community Benefits Program and you can see the translated program, the translated agenda, and the presentation there. You can also, if you want to, call in to get the information in Spanish. If you go to the telephone number 602-580-9659 and use the code 8833787, then you can participate in the Zoom meeting through your telephone. Great, so let me introduce William Cruz from Linguistica, and William Cruz will be telling you what I just said in Spanish. Thanks.
Saludos, mi nombre es William Cruz con Lingüística y bienvenidos todos al taller de estudio de caso del programa de beneficios comunitarios del proyecto de agua a través del Delta. Esta programación está siendo también traducida al español. Para escuchar la traducción en español, usted puede seleccionar el globito abajo de su pantalla y seleccionar español, y también para apagar el audio original, presione Mute Original Audio. También tenemos recursos en español para información de llamada para escuchar por teléfono. El número de teléfono para marcar es 602-580-9659 y el código de acceso es 8833787 seguido por el signo de tecla. Para ver o descargar la presentación traducida, también usted puede acceder a la información que tenemos aquí en la pantalla. También para subtítulos puede presionar el botón en la parte inferior de su pantalla, que son dos Cs, que también dice Closed Caption. Gracias.
Thank you so much. So those of you who want to see the closed captioning, you go to the bottom of your Zoom page and there's a place where you can click on closed captioning, just choose enable. You can access the presentation during the meeting tonight. You go to the Department of Water Resources webpage, the Delta Conveyance Community Benefits Program, the current activities button, and you'll see case study workshop and then workshop materials. There you'll see the PowerPoint presentation for tonight and the agenda for tonight. We will be audio taping and videotaping this presentation. So that will be on the website for you after this meeting, and that will be an audio tape in Spanish and English. So last spring, we had several Zoom meetings about the Community Benefits Program. During those, many of you asked for more information about community benefits programs. How are they organized? How long do they take to develop? What are the important milestones? What makes them work? How would you know if you were going to do something differently? So we organized this community benefits workshop to help you learn, answer some of those questions from community benefits programs. So the agenda is we're doing welcome and introductions now, and then the agenda and how to participate. Then we'll have a community benefits program overview, what we know so far from what the Department of Water Resources has developed. Then we'll hear some characteristics of community benefits programs. We'll hear 2 case studies from community benefits. We'll have a chance for me to facilitate a discussion among the 3 presenters, and then a chance for public questions and discussion. We'll end at 9 o'clock tonight. To ask questions, All you do is you go to the bottom of your Zoom page and you hit the button that says reactions, and then raise your hand. I'll try to allow a little bit of time, maybe for a question or two after each presentation, but we really want to make sure that you have enough time from 7:30 to 8 to really get into a discussion. So I'll try to just have one or two questions after each presentation. It can be hard in 2 hours to save enough time. So that's how you ask a question. You'll notice that the chat button is disabled. It's too hard to manage during the Zoom meeting. So let me tell you a little bit about the Community Benefits Program so far. The Community Benefits Program is part of the Delta Conveyance Project. The goal is, the reason for developing one is the Department of Water Resources acknowledges that the direct project benefits, state water project reliability, are not located in the Delta. The rest of the state benefits from the state water project. It's also to acknowledge that if the project is approved, it could have potential adverse effects on the Delta communities through the construction. Finally, to acknowledge the limitations of traditional CEQA in California Environmental Quality Act, environmental mitigation. There's only so many things you can do in under CEQA environmental mitigation. A community benefits program might be able to do different things. So the objectives that DWR has set out for the Delta Conveyance Project Community Benefits Program are, first, to provide a mechanism for the Delta community to identify opportunities for local benefits, opportunities that you would identify. Provide a mechanism for the project proponents to demonstrate good faith, transparency, and accountability to the community through formal commitments developed with community members' input. And finally, to protect and enhance the unique cultural, recreational, natural resource, and agricultural values of the Delta as an evolving place. The Department of Water Resources is suggesting two components of the Delta Community Benefits Program. One would be a fund. This would be a grassroots framework to fund community priorities, developed and managed to empower local communities. The second would be project implementation commitments, hiring targets, job training, education, local business utilization, and infrastructure and facilities that could be improved or left behind during the project. So as you all asked for examples of community benefits programs, there were a number of suggestions that people had at what would help you learn and apply that learning to the Delta. So these examples that you'll hear tonight, the two case studies and the information about community benefits programs in general, will give you different perspectives about different kinds of structures, different kinds of locations, and different kinds of challenges. To figure out which case studies for tonight, we looked at community benefits programs that met the following criteria. First, that it was for large infrastructure. It doesn't help to compare community benefits programs for small 6-month programs. This will be a large infrastructure. Second, that will have long-term construction impacts, where the project benefits were not local, but the impacts of the project were local. And the location and the potential for environmental justice and economically disadvantaged community concerns were paramount. So using those criteria, I looked all over the United States to find examples that I thought would be helpful to the Delta for learning about community benefits program. I wish it were true that there was a water conveyance program that would take longer than 10 years to develop, that was in a rural area with environmental justice concerns, but I couldn't find one. So I think these case studies provide you with examples of large infrastructure, long-term construction impacts, impacts from the project being local, and environmental justice and economically disadvantaged community concerns. So now we're going to turn to hear from Ben Beach, who's the legal director from Power Switch Action. After we hear from Ben, we'll hear from Omar Mohammed, who's the Executive Director of the Low County Alliance for Model Communities. And then finally, Scott Collins, who's the City Manager from the City of Morro Bay. So Ben, let me turn the microphone over to you.
Thanks very much, Juliana. Good evening. I'm Ben Beach, the Legal Director at PowerSwitch Action and the Director of our Community Benefits Law Center. I'm very pleased to be with you tonight and to help share some information about community benefits agreements, and related tools for ensuring that development projects can and do deliver community benefit. I want to be clear at the outset that while I do believe generally that major projects like the Conveyance Project should deliver real and substantial community benefit, I'm not here to endorse or promote any particular approach to the Delta Conveyance Project or take any position on the project itself. I'm simply here as an informational resource on these tools so that folks in the audience can learn more about them. Who is PowerSwitch Action? We are a national network of local organizations working to realize multiracial feminist democracy in our cities and towns. Our network of 20 affiliates across the country build power at the grassroots level to make major changes in their cities and regions. Our affiliates have advanced community benefits approaches to economic development across a litany of major projects, from the first major CBA community benefits agreement at the Staples Center in Los Angeles to the first community benefits agreement in Tennessee's history at Nashville's new soccer stadium. A big part of my job today, I think, is to introduce the basics of community benefits agreements. And we've already heard about the phrase community benefits program. And then Omar and Scott are going to go into the specifics about how community benefits have worked in their communities. So I thought we might start with at least one definition of a term that is often thrown around in these conversations, and that's the term community benefits agreements. So what's a community benefits agreement, or a CBA for short? I'll probably keep saying CBA through the course of the presentation, so that's what I'm referring to when I say CBA. Here is a working definition that we like to use. Community benefits agreements are legally binding agreements with community providing for community benefit at a single development project or related set of projects, and enforceable against all the relevant parties, including contractors, tenants, future project owners, and others. So that's a working definition that we can start with and talk about going forward. When we talk about community benefits agreements, or community benefits programs, we like to emphasize three core principles that we think are essential to having effective community benefits programs or agreements. The first is accountability. Accountability is achieved by having clear, specific, measurable commitments memorialized in legally binding agreements that the community can easily enforce. Accountability is also achieved through effective community oversight of the delivery of community benefits. The second principle that we like to talk about in discussing what we think are effective community benefits programs and agreements is mutual benefit. Is meaningful benefit. This means that the benefits are responsive to genuine community needs, address the adverse impacts of the project, and are delivered at significant scale, and most certainly at a scale that is appropriate to both the scope of the project and its impact. And the last principle that we like to talk about in this arena is democratic participation. I like to emphasize this one because it's often forgotten that community benefits agreements first arrived on the scene as a way, first and foremost arrived on the scene and came into existence as a way to disrupt the cozy relationship, too often cozy relationship between elected officials and developers when it came to economic development projects. and give impacted and excluded communities a real voice in economic development. So the process of arriving at a community benefits agreement or program is just as important as the substance of the benefits under discussion. CBAs, in our view, should be arrived at through inclusive, participatory processes that enable impacted communities and those too often excluded, often low-income communities of color, the information, tools, and space they need to articulate community needs and solutions in the context of the project and effectively negotiate for those things. I've also been asked to talk about what subjects it is that community benefits agreements commonly address. Before I do that, I want to say that community benefits agreements are by design unique in every situation because every community's needs and every project are different. And for that reason, if there's something a community demands as a benefit, they shouldn't have to show that there's a precedent for that in some other community benefits agreement or program. Again, community benefits programs should be unique to the community and to the project. That's if they're working effectively for the reasons I've already talked about in talking about the principles. But nonetheless, let's review this list of things that have commonly been the subject of community benefits agreements. So of course, living wages and benefits for jobs connected to the project. Stability and predictability of work. Far too often we're encountering situations where systems of contract or misclassification are leading to just-in-time scheduling and these other measures are leading to work in jobs that are not stable, are not predictable, that people cannot build their lives around, can't raise their families on, because they're just, sort of at the constant whim of their employer, or just not, the employment relationship is not clear and it's unstable. So when we're talking about jobs that are helpful for the community, we're talking about jobs that are both well-paying and stable and predictable. So that's been another subject of community benefits agreements. Targeted and fair chance hiring. These are measures that ensure that there's equitable access to the jobs for disadvantaged communities, impacted communities, folks that have been excluded from projects and for the benefit of projects, and that they're able to get access to the jobs, and that folks who that there's no discrimination occurring in the hiring process against people who may or may not have a history of convictions or other involvement with the criminal justice system. That's what targeted and fair chance hiring is about. Affordable housing, that one should be no mystery to anyone. It's very often the case in these community benefits agreements that there are measures included to ensure that if there's residential development connected to the project or not, that the project contributes to the provision of housing that folks in the community can actually afford. Environmental mitigation. It's already been mentioned that the CEQA mitigation measures or other measures that come out of an environmental review process may or may not be effective in reaching all of the community benefits agreements. It might even be the case in reaching all the community measures that the community needs in terms of its or it demands in terms of its needs. It might also be the case that what comes out of the environmental review process is not even regarded as adequate by the community in terms of what it does environmentally. So we've seen community benefits agreements add additional environmental mitigation on top of what comes out of the CEQA or NEPA processes. Of course, support for small businesses has also been included in community benefits agreements. And then, of course, a whole range of types of community services have been supported and provided for through community benefits agreements. Could be a grocery store in a community or neighborhood that doesn't have one, public art, community meeting space, health clinics, childcare, workforce development or job training services. A whole range of community services have been provided through community benefits agreements. I also want to emphasize, it's very easy to get attached to, in these discussions, it can be very easy to get attached to a particular tool. Like we want a community benefits agreement, or we want, this thing. I want to emphasize that, effective community benefits outcomes have been realized through a variety of paths on major projects. And so I've listed some of the different paths here that have led to, effective delivery of community benefits. These include, ordinances and policies like a local living wage law, or, local inclusionary housing requirements, or measures around subsidy accountability. Those are all, those can all be memorialized as laws or policies at the local, regional, or state level even. Land use planning, we've seen community benefits measures memorialized in what are called specific plans, or other land use controls at the local or regional level. So that's been another vehicle that people have used to memorialize community benefits. Government agreements. The community benefits agreement model that I've previously described, or is often thought of in kind of a classic CBA, is one where it's an agreement between the community, directly between the community and the project owner. But there can be different parties to these things, and so we've seen arrangements where the agreement is between the government and its major tenant, or between the government and a master developer. And even in those kind of arrangements where community benefits are memorialized in government agreements, community members can still have the power to enforce those provisions as named, third-party beneficiaries in the agreement. And of course, they can still sit on project oversight committees with the power to, address deficiencies in compliance. The private CBAs is kind of the model that I've been talking about. That's a direct agreement between community and the developer, and or project owner. And shared resources is one, to say that as an example, folks can step in outside of the specific terms of a community benefits program or agreement to bring resources to the table that support community benefits. In one case where our affiliates coalition had won a targeted hiring requirement for local disadvantaged residents on a major project, they were separately able to raise foundation and government funding for a job center that facilitated the job training and placement important to making the targeted hiring measures work. So that wasn't included in the community benefits agreement, but it was a critical part of achieving success in terms of the CBA's goal of enabling local disadvantaged residents to obtain work on the job. I also just want to say that these tools can and have been used in combination with each other, and often are. You can have an ordinance and a specific plan and a government agreement and a private CBA and shared funding strategies all come together around a single project. And then I'll just wrap up by saying that we do have more resources available regarding community benefits agreements and related strategies on our website. And I've this slide shows just a couple of those. And our website is listed there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben. Let me turn now to our first case study then. Omar Mohammed is from the Low County Alliance for Model Communities, and he'll talk about the case study that he's presenting. Thanks, Omar.
Thank you, Juliana, and Ben, thank you. My name is Omar Mohammed. I'm the Executive Director for the Low Country Alliance for Model Communities here in North Charleston, South Carolina. And our organization is a grassroots organization founded to improve the quality of life for the residents that we work with every day. So just to give you a little bit of background on the community benefits agreement that we helped the community negotiate with a developer, a warehouse developer. Again, LAMC organization was founded for the purpose of advocating environmental justice and promoting community development, education, environmental justice, quality housing, and community involvement in the target areas of the city of North Charleston. The community mitigation plan is something that LAMC worked on as part of a strategy to deal with disproportionate impact from the State Ports Authority. So we had some background and experiences on doing these types of negotiations. So we pulled that experience that we had with that project into developing the community benefits agreement. And I can say that this is the first community benefit agreement framework for the city of North Charleston. LAMC created the following nonprofit organizations to address critical needs in the 7 communities that we work in. One being a research organization called the Charleston Community Research to Action Board. And basically that organization, or CCRAF for short, that organization is responsible for doing all the environmental justice and health research in the communities that we represent. And they also do that same research for other organizations and other neighborhoods that reach out to them in the Low Country. And then we help the community develop a community first land trust, which is a democratic model in which the community collectively owns property, and then housing or rental units are placed on that property. And what that does is allow for the affordability of housing to be available to the community in perpetuity. So it's a process on stabilizing communities, preserving the affordability of housing in particularly vulnerable communities, low wealth communities. So as we work with communities, we have to acknowledge that we have unique challenges, and these challenges are different in many of the communities. So they look different based on the community that you are working with. So I want to talk a little bit about some of those challenges and a theory of change that we developed with working with communities that we work in. First, I want to say that this process is evolving, so it's always changing. You find yourself shifting back and forth between the different strategies that we deploy in the communities. In the communities that we work with, and this is true across the country, not just in the communities we work in, but across the country, communities struggle to articulate their needs, right? In helping them to advocate for the change that they see. So a lot of times we're going in with a blank slate is what we call it, right? We don't come in with preconceived ideas or preconceived solutions for a particular community. We kind of co-design what our how we will go about addressing the issue or concern. And then there are always competing interests or competing agendas that show up in communities. And then when you're working with these different groups, you have to know how to negotiate all the different agendas that are around the table. And this is true when we dealt with the community benefits agreement for this particular project. And I will explain where those kind of conflicting interests arisen in the process. Communities sometimes lack the confidence that's necessary for them to take the lead in many of these projects. So what LAMC does is we go in and work with the community and really help them to build up their confidence that they are the contextual experts, right? I cannot talk about their lived experiences. They live it every day. They are the contextual experts for the lived experiences that they have in their communities. So they are the experts when it comes to that. And helping communities tap into that and build up their confidence where they can speak in their, stand in their truth and speak to the realities that they live every day. And then helping and strengthening and providing support for the able leadership in communities, having them to stand up and activate their voices and come into the leadership role that many of them have stepped into. And then lastly, helping, really, this is something that I find is one of the most difficult challenges when you work with communities is building trust and maintaining that level of trust, right? And how we build that trust and how we build the trust in communities first is that we do not come in with solutions. We co-create solutions that will help communities address their issues. We also build trust by addressing not only the need that we're there to address, but also the other needs in communities around housing or education or economic development. They all go hand in hand. So we might be in there to address flooding, but we're also addressing housing and some of the social and economic challenges that the community are facing. So we go in with a multi-pronged approach to many of the systemic challenges in communities. And what this process has led to is a theory of change that Lancey has developed. And this theory of change allows us to engage our communities in meaningful ways, which allow them to be educated on the issues and concerns that they identify. Right? We don't come in and say that this is a problem, right? They identify certain issues and concerns as the problem. Then it becomes our responsibility to work with them to bring in the necessary resources, bring in the funding, bring in the technical support to help them to address those issues and concerns. And once that happens, it leads to us being able to tap into the power that the community already has, which allows them to advocate for the solutions to some of the challenges that they face. So Ben did a really good job with explaining the key components of what a community benefits agreement is. So I'm not going to touch on all the specifics there, but why do we want to develop a community benefits agreement? We want to do that because, again, a lot of the communities, or particularly the ones that we work in, they're disadvantaged, they're impoverished, they are disinvested in. So these types of projects, and they're disproportionately impacted. So a lot of times warehouses or ports or other types of facilities, they are contributing to impacts, right? This cumulative impact. So they're adding to an additional impact on communities. So we pursue community benefits agreements with private developers, private landowners in the pursuit of addressing those inequities that those projects could contribute to. So some of the community benefits elements that I would like to kind of touch on today, and Ben, again, covered many of these, economic development, where you're looking at supporting local hiring initiatives, business development opportunities, affordable housing, education, where you invest resources in the public education of the young people and adults in the community, employment opportunities, where you have priority hiring to not only provide livable wage, but advancements for the residents in the area. And then providing stability, right, by accountability and transparency of the process. And on the right is just an example of specific community benefit agreements that came out of the Staples Center community benefits agreement in Los Angeles. So now I want to discuss a little bit specifically about the community benefits agreement we helped the core Cherokee community negotiate with a warehouse developer in the city of North Charleston. And just to provide a little bit of context and background, Frontier was the developer for a warehouse it was a planned development area that already had zoning to build a warehouse, but the type of warehouse that they wanted to build, we felt like it did not fit the PUD that was zoned for that particular area. So we challenged the zoning application at the zoning commission, and we won. We were able to convince all the zoning commissioners that this project did not meet the definition of the current zoning. So they sided with the community and denied the zoning application. In the city of North Charleston, the zoning administrator has the ability to overturn the decision of the zoning commission, which she used that privilege to overturn that decision. The community then filed an appeal to the zoning board appeal commission, and this would have required a judge to listen to both sides and then make a decision. The developer felt that there was a strong opportunity for he could potentially lose during the zoning appeal. So he then reached out to the community to have some subsequent meetings with the community about how to negotiate a path forward. And what that path forward looked like for us is that we began to have discussions with key members of the community, key stakeholders, key nonprofits that were in the area that had a vested interest in the successful implementation and development of this community benefits agreement. So we met and we came up with a process that would work for really achieving the end goal of developing a community benefits agreement. So what this process developed into is a commitment from all the participants that our role was to advocate and negotiate what was in the best interest of the community. Not in the best interest of the city of North Charleston or any of the nonprofits that were around the room, but what was in the best interest of the residents of Socorro Cherokee. So we all agreed that that is why each one of the participants were at the table. We also agreed that our commitment was to continue to educate and support the power that was within the community, right? So going back to the community, informing them where we were in the process and soliciting from them input that informed how we negotiated with the developer. So we kept them educated and supported their power in the process. And then we all agreed that we would have a willingness to engage and participate in innovative new forms of cooperations, right? So not just saying that our way was the only way to get to an agreement, right? So we were always, we approached this with an open mind. To being flexible in the things that we were asking to allow the developer to be able to get to a yes, right? And I can talk about this one, but because this was a challenging point for some of our participants around the table, right? Sometimes community groups or some other stakeholders at the table think that they have a developer over a barrel, right? We got them now. So let's just, get them. And we had to really pull people away from that and really, really stress the point that we're here to get a win-win, right? We're not here to really put the developer at a disadvantage where he cannot move forward with his project. And then, he goes about developing the project in a way that is not beneficial to the community, because ultimately he owned the property, right? He owned that property. It was a private property, and we were in a good position to negotiate. So we did not want to take advantage of the situation. So we had to constantly remind the participants around the table about the original process that we all agreed to. So that was some of the competing interests and agendas that were around the table. And then using at the negotiation table, right, using appreciative inquiry and alternative dispute resolution as we were going through some of the negotiations with the agreement. Being able to use positive, looking at a win-win when we were negotiating was very helpful. When in areas where we disagreed, we turned to alternative dispute resolution techniques and strategies to move us away from, to move us forward to an agreement. And then some of the outcomes of what we were able to achieve with our community benefits agreement, we were able to remove the semi-trucks, which was the primary reason why the community objected to this project. They wanted to service 300 trucks at this warehouse that was going to run right through community, surface streets. So the community wanted to remove those amounts of trucks from their street to the industrial side of the warehouse, which we were successful to get done with this agreement. We also developed a partnership with the local schools. So the developer agreed to develop to developed this partnership with the local elementary school where they donated $15,000 to the school to be used by the school to purchase uniforms to help some of the parents with difficulties purchasing uniforms for their students, as well as enforce good behavior in the students by providing incentives, pizza parties, gift cards, some games, for their gaming systems, those kind of things, some to reinforce positive behavior for the students. And then for them to develop an appropriate buffer between the warehouse and the community. We just didn't want a fence up, right? We wanted vegetated buffer, those things that can be aesthetically pleasing to the community. And then lastly, we were able to negotiate prior to hiring for qualified residents in the Chicora Cherokee neighborhood. What this required is that if a resident identified a job that they were interested in at the warehouse, and they felt like they were qualified for it, if they put in an application, Frontier will guarantee an interview, right? Not guarantee and hire, but guarantee an interview. We can open up doors for folks, but it's up to them to sell themselves when that door is open to them. LAMC added to this last agreement by if there was any Chicora Cherokee resident that felt like they did not qualify, but they were interested in a job, LAMC will provide a workforce development scholarship to them to attend the local technical school to gain that skill set so they can get gainfully employed at the warehouse. And then this is just a list of some of the partners that work with us on the community benefits agreement. Again, the Chicora Cherokee Community Association and their residents, Metanolia, which is another nonprofit in the community. They are a community development corporation. The Reynolds Avenue Business Association and the South Carolina Environmental Law Project. They provided a lawyer for us, pro bono, helped us with the legal framework for the community benefits agreement, which was extremely helpful for us during the project, because we did not have to negotiate with the warehouse lawyer, right? Because we're not lawyers. We don't know that language. So it was very helpful to have a lawyer. So once we had some solid agreement in place, then we turned it over to the lawyers to put it together in a legal framework, which became the community benefits agreement. And this is my last slide. This is my contact information if anyone wants to follow me. Thank you, Juliana, for the time.
Thank you so much, Omar. Very helpful. Let me turn now to Scott Collins. Scott Collins is the city manager from the city of Morro Bay, and Scott will talk about a community benefit program in Morro Bay, California. Scott.
Yes, good evening, and thank you all for your attention. And hopefully, I found the last two presenters to be very, very good and learned a lot from them. And wish I had known what I know now when we put together this community benefit agreement with Castle Wind. So Morro Bay is a small coastal community in Central Coast, California, about 10,000 people. We have had pretty significant evolutions over the last 50 to 60 years. We were sort of a Navy port during World War II. We became a fishing village. And since the fishing industry has really waned in the last 20 years, we've become primarily a tourist destination for the Central Valley and North and Southern California. So we are sort of at a precipice of looking for other opportunities for economic diversification in our community. And one of those big opportunities is with offshore wind, which is becoming very popular and a growing need to help achieve California's greenhouse gas emission goals. So we are, again, looking at a potential offshore wind development about 20 miles off the coast of Morro Bay, just to the north of here. And the Biden administration has made this a priority and has an agreement with the state of California to allow for leasing of federal waters for offshore wind development up to 376 square miles. So there's a lot of potential economic impact to the broader California economy, but also some concerns about how it will affect the remaining fishing grounds, which again is part of our economy here in the Central Coast. So we're really trying to understand both how to mitigate those impacts and also learn how we can make the most of this one-time investment in an entirely new industry off our coast. And we had thankfully learned some of the hard lessons with the East Coast, had gone through a similar process of leasing federal waters for offshore wind development. Didn't go quite as well as the developers had hoped and met with significant lawsuits from labor, fishing, and environmental groups. And so I think the West Coast is hopefully learning from the East Coast about how to approach this, again, opportunity, but also learn the lessons from the East Coast, how to avoid some of those pitfalls. As been mentioned before, any project of this size and scope will go through the normal permitting processes. The city is not a permitting agency with regard to this project, but there are plenty of federal and state agencies that oversee this. The city is at the table with an interagency task force that includes California Coastal Commission, the governor's office, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, the Department of Defense, et cetera. So there'll be a lengthy environmental review process before anything would happen out there. So we're really talking about impacts above and beyond that mitigation. So how did this come to be? Well, in our case, Castle Wind, which used to be Trident Wind, is a American and German renewable energy firm, approached the city in 2016, long before there was any discussion about offshore wind off the coast of California, and started talking about this opportunity. Again, looking at what was happening on the East Coast in Europe and seeing kind of out into the future. It's a very visionary company that was knocking on the federal government's door and unannounced, asking, hey, would you be interested in leasing some of your waters for offshore wind? So we had an interested developer who was at the door, or at our community's doorstep, before anything really materialized. And I think that's a very important component with this community benefit agreement. Having a developer who understood our community, understood our pride in our fishing organizations and fishermen and fisherwomen, being an important part of our history and an ongoing economic component of our community. So they came in early and got to know our community, got to know our nonprofit groups, our city council, our staff. And I think that made a huge difference in understanding, okay, what's really important in this community? There's an environmental ethos in our community as well. Again, the city isn't here to permit the project, but certainly having the city's support could make a huge difference. So Castle Wind also met early with the fishermen organizations and entered into their own separate agreement to mitigate impacts on fishing grounds. And for our city council and our community, that made a huge difference. And then the developer met with each of our council members, and a subcommittee was formed of city council members that met multiple times with the developer. And they also hosted several community forums to help get our community acquainted with this potential opportunity, and also understanding the impacts that are real on the environmental side. After several years of discussion and meetings, we did come to a formal agreement, which was signed by the mayor on behalf of our city council and signed by the CEO of Castle Wind in late 2018. So what is the agreement actually consist of? Well, we liked the approach that Castle Wind took, and so we were willing to go a bit out on a limb and agree to support their application with the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, BOEM for short, for offshore wind lease site that was being developed, and also their broader work towards leveling the playing field. So as it stood in the past, the highest bidder, basically whatever firm was willing to spend the most money on a federal lease site, typically would win the bid. And they felt that wasn't really within the ethos of at least of our community and the environmental component of thinking about the community impacts and how best to benefit and get the most value of this economic opportunity for the local community. And they're really kind of seeing down the line that, especially with the Biden administration, that there may be more support than just simply how much money developers willing to throw at it, but do they have the community supporting it? Do they have the fishermen? Do they have the union groups, the environmental groups on board, that perhaps they would get added benefit looking at the leases when they ultimately do a bid. So that in return for the city agreeing to support their application, they provide the city with $250,000, which will be used to help invest in our harbor related activities and projects. We do have a waterfront here in the Bay that is 50 to 60 years on since it was formed, and there's a lot of infrastructure needs to support not only our commercial and recreational fishing, but also just the tourism component of our community. And if selected for lease site by the federal government, they would also include local hiring provisions, apprenticeships, a maintenance facility in Morro Bay so that we get actual jobs and not just something that occurs offshore and is done in Long Beach or Los Angeles, but actual jobs locally here in Morro Bay. That they would use local supply chain and accommodations through construction and build EV charging stations and those kind of things. So that Castle Wind has a continued presence in our community while they go through the federal lease site process. They sponsored events, they sponsored kids things, are a big chamber of commerce member. They host forums to really stay engaged with our community. We also are providing them first right of refusal of the connection between our city infrastructure to the defunct Morro Bay Power Plant, which still has an active connection to the electric grid, which would be serve as kind of the conveyance from the offshore wind, where the wind is generated, where the energy is generated and put back onto the grid to go out to the 400,000 to 500,000 homes that wind would power on a continuous basis. So very exciting stuff. And we are actually seeing some of the other interested developers knocking on our door and trying to understand how to engage with our community. And we kind of tell them, well, you're a little late to the party. Castle Wind's been here for 3 or 4 years now, doing that exact thing. And it certainly helps our community feel better about this opportunity that we will maximize as much as we can on the economics, but also take care of those who will be impacted by it. And so the city and Castle Wind regularly engage on the process as it moves forward with the federal government and continually address communities' concerns. So this is my contact. There's a lot more to the story than what I presented today, but I didn't want to go on too long, and so I'd be happy to talk to anybody if they ever have any questions. Thank you.
Thanks so much. So what I want to do is just take a couple of minutes to hear from Ben, Omar, and Scott some of the questions that I know will be important as you think about applying these lessons to the Delta. So one of the things I'm interested in is at what point does it make sense to start thinking about community benefits? In the Delta, there's the development of a proposal, but the environmental impact report isn't even out yet. So what's the right time to start thinking about a community benefits program? Any of you, Ben, Scott, or Omar?
I would say now, begin thinking about those things now, so that you can, because a lot of times communities, like I was stating before, communities have a myriad of different challenges that they're trying to address, particularly environmental justice communities, disproportionate impact communities, and they need to get their heads wrapped around this idea of what challenges they want to address, what can this project address, what it cannot address, and how it want to articulate its needs. And I can tell you from experience, from dealing with a lot of these, and it's unfortunate, but a lot of times communities have to prove that they are disproportionately impacted, and they have to prove it with data. So give yourself enough time to collect that information, make your case on why you are proposing this as a community, as an element of the community benefits agreement.
And is there a possibility that it could be too early or too late in your experience?
No, it all varies by the project.
Okay.
You know, our first project that we were able to negotiate, we came in on the final, on the draft EIS, right? The draft environmental impact statement. And on the second one, we came in right when they had submitted their application, right? So,
Right.
you know, so you get involved when you can, and I always tell people to keep your mind open, right? Sometimes we dig our heels in, we think that that's the only way to have an issue resolved or addressed, and we don't want to move from that. And a lot of times we lose an opportunity because we have dug our heels in. So we should keep our minds open to different types of ways of getting to a win, right?
Now, Scott.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Now, Scott, you clearly you haven't been permitted yet. So it sounds like you might think that it's not too early to have developed a community benefits agreement.
Yeah, I think so. And I think we were under the impression that the federal process would have started in 2018. There was some challenges and reluctancy from the department, the Navy, just some strategic initiatives out, 20 miles to 200 miles offshore that this may conflict with. So our congressional member, Salud Carbajal, spent a lot of time sort of negotiating with the Department of Defense. So I think we were under the impression that we would be where we were at 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. But that being said, I think, like Omar's saying, the earlier you get into the community, the better. And with Castle Wind, I think, they sort of demystified what this is. I mean, we're talking about 700 to 800 foot tall wind turbines. I mean, these are massive things that, they're still in a lot of ways still developing some of the technology to make it work. That's going to be floating 20 miles offshore. So getting somebody in who's had experience and there's a real human being talking to you, it sort of demystifies some of those things, and you get to know them and get to build that trust. I would be hesitant to get too far into the weeds and try to get too specific too early, because you may miss opportunities as a community of linking things. The more that you can talk with your partnering agencies and nonprofits, schools, churches, et cetera, you might start to think bigger. The more time you have to do that, I think you're better served, is sort of my experience. And I forgot to mention at the outset of my presentation that I just want to acknowledge that the city of Morro Bay is a recipient of state water. So we are a beneficiary of the state water project. So just putting that out there, but hopefully it didn't conflict with my presentation.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Great. I was just going to weigh in to agree with Omar and Scott, and to say that an additional tool that we've sometimes employed or encouraged folks to employ is something like a community impact report, where in addition to the disclosing the environmental benefits or the environmental impacts, a project is disclosing its impacts or features in other ways that are more relevant to what the community is interested in. How many jobs is this project going to create? What are the wage levels? Is it going to create housing? How will it impact small business? How will it impact the city's, what's the fiscal impact of the project? There's all these things that communities care about that can be really relevant to formulating a community benefits proposal, and give community the information that it needs in order to do that. And so that can be also a part of the early process to assist community in formulating a strong community benefits proposal. It's also just important, I think this is going to both what Omar and Scott said, to get the community has time to coalesce around a set of demands. The strongest, most effective community benefits agreements we've seen have been in cases where there's a really broad and deep community benefits coalition that's, it's not just it's authentically representing community needs and a variety of community voices, but it's also pretty broad and unified. And so you've got, sort of all the relevant stakeholders coming to the table, unified around a set of community benefits demands. That's very powerful and also very helpful for the project developer, because that's bringing to the table this, otherwise disparate set of voices around a, kind of unified set of points for negotiation. Makes the conversation about community benefits a lot more manageable, and it's much easier to arrive at a sort of a strong, clear agreement when that happens. But of course, that requires time. It requires time to get for those groups to come together, for them to agree on a platform, for them to figure out their positions, all that stuff. So that's all advocating for early work in this area. The only time that where we, I would support groups sort of waiting on this stuff, it relates to something Scott said, is if you don't know the contours of the project, it's hard to negotiate, or if there's some element of the project, something that's going to get developed or figured out in the future, if you don't know whether you're dealing with housing or warehousing or a power plant, like those are very different projects. And so if there's something that some important feature of the project you don't know about, it's hard to negotiate around it. So, but in the case of the Delta Conveyance project, it seems like the basic contours and nature of the project are known. So
another question that I might note is different from the cities that you've talked about, Scott and Omar, and maybe Ben, your experience as well. In this situation, it's a rural area, a region, not just a couple of cities. So how do you get the community together to provide that input? How do you get the community together? What kind of organizing strategies or engagement strategies make sense to get that initial organizing happen?
Yeah, our fallback with government, on the government side, is our task force. You're not going to have time probably to form a joint powers agreement of some sort, so maybe not a legal apparatus, but some kind of task force. And I apologize for my ignorance. I don't know how many counties would be affected by this, but certainly that's a factor in looking at those county governments, and maybe have a board of supervisor on from each of those that would be represented, and the cities but also the nonprofits and those most likely to be impacted, but also those who can bring the most to the table about, like, gosh, we need to think big here. And I think that's like what Ben was saying, like, the communities need to think big. I mean, this is a major project that's going to be very impactful on the negative side, but also could be very enriching if there's enough of the right people at the table. So I would take a kind of a task force approach and give yourself several months to kind of sort things out.
Omar, organizing getting the community together over a region with several counties, villages, towns, municipalities, etc.
Yeah, I would say that a coalition framework where you ensure that community representation is at the table, right? And I can say early on, it has to be established that the communities are seen as an expert at the table as well, because that can be a power dynamic that exists in the room that can definitely shift, right? And you can get a lot of uncorporation that happens when people feel like they are not being heard in the process. So that has to be a conversation that is formed early, that communities are at this table as equal partners, as experts in the contextual activities that are happening in their communities, and that power has to be held in that coalition.
Excellent. I see that Gia Moreno and Anna Swenson have their hands up. Let me just ask one or two more questions, and then we'll open to turn to you in line. So don't put your hands down yet, but I've got you in the queue. So one of the questions that in some of the early workshops, what we asked people to do is to tell us what category of benefit did people want, and what were the most important categories. So we heard that natural resources, for example, was an important category. That water quality, both drinking and for habitat, was an important category. And then we heard sort of suggested ideas under those categories. How did, in your projects, how did you come up with a list of priorities? How did you prioritize those priorities? How did you make sure that those priorities didn't privilege certain kinds of people or certain places? Or how did you make sure that that priority setting made some sense in this big impact project? Omar, and then Scott, maybe? And then maybe I'll turn to you, Ben.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we just had a process where we listed those priorities that were discussed and we just listed them. And then everyone had, and this may be elementary, but we gave people dots, right? These little sticky dots. And everyone had 4 or 5 sticky dots, depending on how long the list was. And then you just put your dot next to the interest area that most appealed to you, and then the ones who got the most dots, those were the ones that we began to work on as a negotiating points.
Thanks, Omar. Scott, priorities.
Largely a council directed thing, and it was really sort of the tangential relations to the project. In other words, they needed to use our harbor infrastructure to kind of connect to the grid and make their project viable. So why not turn and reinvest in that very area, which has been underinvested for the last 20 plus years. So I think it largely kind of fell on that. And then they did an economics, a basic economic study on the benefits. And so that sort of helped fill in the blanks as far as job creation and housing, maintenance facilities and those kind of things here in our city.
Thanks, Scott.
Yeah.
Ben, how do you come up with this huge list of priorities and then figure out how to get those priorities into a community benefits agreement?
Yeah, I mean, I'm accustomed to working with, self-organizing coalitions of the type that Omar is talking about. And as I mentioned, those coalitions, when they're big and powerful, include a lot of different interest groups with a lot of different bottom lines and ideal versions of the project. And so it's a negotiation inside of the coalition. But most often, in my experience, honoring the top priorities of all of the stakeholders at the table when you're putting forward an initial negotiating position. Things shift over the course of negotiation, but in terms of setting up an initial list, that's our coalitions, in order to be effective and keep the coalition together, are bringing to the table a long list of priorities based on what is being lifted up in the community. So as I say, those coalitions need to be both broad but also deep and deeply connected to community needs. And so even if the list is long, it's actually representative of real community needs, or in the surrounding community. So there's that. I would also say on the government side, we recently worked in a city that developed its own, developed a stakeholder process for a major proposed project that brought lots of people to the table to from multiple coalitions to discuss what community benefits they wanted to see at this project. And then the local government itself had developed and used what they refer to as a racial equity matrix that both studied the racial inequities within the community, and then evaluated the community benefits measures, proposed community benefits measures coming out of its stakeholder process against, in terms of how effective they would be in impacting some of those racial equity indicators, and said that it would continue to evaluate, even after a community benefits agreement was developed, those community benefits measures in terms of how much they were actually doing to that we've seen a government entity used in the context of the community benefits process.
That's so interesting. So I have 4 people in the queue and I haven't forgotten you. I just want to ask, Ben, you noted that there's a lot of ways to formalize the program. Is that part of the initial coalition discussion about how, when we get from ideas to priorities to a thing, what are the ways to formalize that program? How do you get that into writing? Omar said he worked with a lawyer. Scott worked with the council. What are the ways to get that formalized so that it goes from ideas to a thing?
I mean, in my experience, it's what's most important is to start with the what, and then, I think it's helpful to work with lawyers on the how, and it's often true that different demands can be realized through different vehicles. That was maybe the key takeaway from the slide I was saying earlier, and just being, I think this is lines of what Omar was saying, just being open to that. It might be like, it might be that the way, you get to that job training program is through working with this funder outside of the community benefits agreement, or it might be that that it's actually best to memorialize this targeted hiring requirement in that agreement, or that plan, or that thing that already exists. So I think that is an important role that lawyers can play, is to try to help people understand the landscape and the range of possible vehicles that are available. But I as an attorney that works in this area, I try to be careful to like not overemphasize the role of lawyers in this. I really liked Omar's description of sort of like, we figured it all out, we sort of figured everything out, and then the lawyers kind of helped us, write it down. That's a good role for lawyers. We don't want these conversations to be lawyer dominated, because that like privileges all the technical side and can really minimize community voice, or make people feel like they're not the kind of experts that Omar described, when in fact they are. So I think this sort of consultative role of helping people understand the landscape and what all is possible, and then helping the demands get written down in the right places and in ways that are going to be legally effective and enforceable, is a good role for lawyers, and it's helpful for community folks to work with lawyers in that regard, for that role.
Thanks. Let me turn to the people who have their hands up, and if we have time, I might turn to those other questions. The question, Gia, you raised your hands first. Let me go ahead and ask you, and I have 3 other people in the queue after you. So Gia, you want to unmute your phone and ask your question?
Yeah, I want to know how, he just brought up again, a job training program, when it was like expressed numerous times by myself and others, that there's no way to take somebody who spent their entire life in ag. There's no way to take somebody who's multi-generational in ag and just toss them into a job training program and give them something else. The people that you've brought on, by hearing them talk, how are they planning on, like for Hood, where I'm from, my entire town will be destroyed by this program. What community benefit will be provided? Everybody there pretty much is well set into their career, they're retired. How is a job training program going to provide housing for them when their houses are, gone pretty much, or they have to move due to the construction process? How is a job training program going to benefit us when our water is polluted, or our air is polluted due to this entire process? How is a job training program going to benefit us when we have to go through 12 years of construction and traffic? All of these things, these programs that you're bringing in from other places, have absolutely no tie to agriculture or to the Delta or to the different communities that are involved. So I just need to know how these people that don't come into our communities, that don't have any ties to our communities, can sit there and say that they know what's best for our community with this fund.
Omar, let me call on you first and then go to Ben and then Scott. So Gia mentioned that some of the concerns would be water, jobs, job training, housing, and traffic. How could a community benefits program help those people with those kinds of concerns?
Yeah, I hear the frustration. from the young lady that was just that posed the question. And these
I'm
are
almost 40.
yes, ma'am. I get it. So these are definitely difficult, emotional projects that we all, particularly communities that are impacted by these types of projects that we all experience. And in no way am I suggesting that our approach is the only approach, or the mitigation or the community benefits agreement that we were able to achieve is going to translate well here. I think the process, right? We should be open, and I understand it's difficult when your community is going to be displaced by a potential project. The communities that will be adversely impacted by a project like this definitely need to be made whole. And if they are displaced, those homes need to be, they need to be compensated for the loss of connectedness to their community, the loss of their home, the loss of employment. All that needs to be compensated when this project moves forward. And I believe that NEPA will allow some mitigating provisions here, and perhaps even through your state mini NEPA.
Yeah,
I would assume that it will.
So just so people understand, I gave the speakers kind of the bare minimum about what the Delta Conveyance Project is. So they aren't able to say that the Delta Conveyance Project would or wouldn't fix this or that. I'm giving you, I'm hoping that these three speakers are giving you some examples of things they did in their community. And then you can ask these questions about, could a community benefits program include housing? Could a community benefits program address water quality? Could a community, so those kind of things. So I'm sorry for jumping in, but I don't want to put them on the spot to answer something about the Delta Conveyance or the tunnel and how it will impact you when I didn't give them enough background to do that. So I'm sorry if that was a lack on my part. So let me turn to, thanks, Gia. If you want another question, just get back in line and I'll see that your hand's up again. So Anna Swenson, you had a question. I think you were next. Anna.
Yes, thank you. So my name is Anna Swenson. I've been fighting this project now for 7 years. I am a DCA Stakeholder Engagement Committee member. So I've sat through 2 years of meetings of them literally not listening to anything that the people who they asked to come sit at a stakeholder committee haven't taken any of our suggestions or any of our concerns. They have not really addressed those, and they have moved this project on in literally the same exact format as they have in all of the other iterations of the Delta Tunnel Water Fix BDCP project. I really appreciated Ben, because he came in and said, I'm not for or against this project. It seemed like the gentleman from Morro Bay was a little bit more supportive. The number one thing I want to say is the Delta is not for sale. There is no amount of community benefit that could ever equal to what we will lose if this project is built. This project will destroy multi-generational farmers and farming operations that have been here since the gold rush. There is no affordable housing. There is no broadband. There is nothing that you can give us that would make it so that we would actually benefit from this project. And there's been an economic study that was done that was then summarily ignored. And that was said that this project would not benefit not only the people in the Delta, but the people in the state of California. The differences between the projects that you have presented to us tonight and the potential projects that they've tried to pull off in California is that DWR has a history of not fulfilling their promises when it comes to community benefit projects. And I'm afraid we're going to fall victim to the same exact path that all of the other projects that have been promised community benefits and have not been given the opportunity to have them. We do not need an overlook that looks over the river that they have now taken 50% of in a community that is an agrarian, very special place to live, and we're very lucky to be here. And the state of California is literally trying to come in and steal these people's homes and steal their water and steal their livelihoods and steal their multi-generational operations. They have a right to farm here. They've done a good job up to this point, and this is not the time to do community benefits. Tomorrow is not the time to do community benefits. There is no amount of community benefits that could ever equal to what we will lose in this area, all the way down to where the Tracy pumps. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. And again, I just want to let people know that the 3 people who are on the phone, the presenters, they're not pro or against the Delta Conveyance project. They can't really answer anything about it, but we are taking all of your points and writing them down. If you have any questions about how this might or might not apply to the Delta Conveyance project, that would be really great. Eric, Christian, I think you're next in the queue.
Okay,
yes,
thank
we
you.
can, thanks.
Without speaking to the efficacy of the project and hearing the passion of the previous 2 speakers, I really feel for them, and I don't wish to do that. What I wanted to do specifically was speak to the issue of the community benefit agreement only, and so I wanted to be very clear about that and let it be known, especially after hearing the presentation made by the city manager from Morro Bay. There is the euphemism community benefit agreement has a negative connotation in the state of California because it is a euphemism for what is known as a project labor agreement. It's a discriminatory, exclusionary agreement that is meant to include only unions in the building process of any project. The Bureau of Labor Statistics is quite clear that 86% of the California construction workforce chooses to wake up on a daily basis and work in a union-free construction environment. And so when we throw out these terms like community benefit agreements and labor, labor constitutes both signatory and non-signatory, union and non-union. So any project that would ever go forward, and again, I'm not speaking to the efficacy of the project, it needs to be clear that in this region in particular, almost 90% of the construction workforce is non-union. Your largest mechanical contractors, your largest electrical contractors down the line are all non-union. And so all stakeholders would need to be viewed as being at the table, not just those who are the loudest, not just those who happen to have more political clout at the time, but a truly diverse and all encompassing group of people and group of stakeholders at the table. So I just want to be very clear, CBAs have a negative connotation and that there is another side to that terminology. And I just wanted to be clear on that. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Eric. Let me turn to you, Ben. I know the term project labor agreement, but I always thought that was a different thing than a community benefits agreement. Can you correct me if that's a part of a CBA or it's the same thing, or what is a project labor agreement?
Yeah, these terms are sometimes interchange or used interchangeably. We don't use them that way. We draw a very clear distinction between a community benefits agreement and a project labor agreement. They're two different things. A project labor agreement relates solely to the construction phases of the construction of a project and governs the way that construction jobs will happen, the way that hiring will happen, the way that wages will be paid, a variety of things all relating to the construction job side of the project. Community benefits agreements, as I've described, are much broader. They relate to a range of community benefits that happen on the project. They're usually negotiated with a large group of community coalition and other stakeholders, whereas that's not usually the case with project labor agreements as well. There is also a term which further complicates this a little bit, called a community workforce agreement, which is a project labor agreement that contains targeted hiring measures. So that is maybe one of the complicating factors. A community workforce agreement, does all the normal things that a project labor agreement does, but it also helps ensure that there's access to those construction jobs for targeted communities. So that's a tool that has been used on a range of projects up and down the state of California. And I'm sorry if the caller thinks that has a negative connotation. I certainly personally do not. It's a tool that we have supported. But as I said, I'm not here to take any position at all with regard to this project or with regard to any tool that should be used on this project.
Thanks so much. And for Eric, at the moment, the Department of Water Resources has proposed, I mean, these are very loose terms, but a thing called a community fund, which would be more what you would have the idea of a community benefits agreement, and then an set of implementation commitments. And they were thinking the implementation commitments, as Ben was saying, might be more about what happens during construction. And then the community benefits agreement funds might be something else. But I'm going to make sure that every time we talk about this, we are really clear about what things are and are not, and what language we're using, because it's clear that people have used different terms for different things, and we don't want to accidentally confuse each other. So Mike Moran, I think you were next in the queue, and then I have Bill Wells, Tom Schlosser, and Jim Wallace. Mike, do you want to unmute yourself? Yeah.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Sure.
Great. I got a couple questions. One right off the bat is, why does Morro Bay have jurisdiction or standing in this? And did you get any blowback from any of the other communities, Cuycos or Pismo or Avila Beach or anything like that? And I got another question too, but I just want to get that one out of the way.
Okay. So Scott, how come you got to have an agreement with Castle Wind?
Yeah, it's a great question, Mike. I'm sorry I didn't emphasize it. We do not have a kind of permitting authority on this project. The reason why Morro Bay is at the table is we have a decommissioned power plant that doesn't operate. However, the grid still connects to the power plant. And the outfall pipe that used to cool, used to send the hot water, processed water out to the ocean is still there. And that would likely be the way that Castle Wind or whoever would connect to the grid. So they would need to come through the city's infrastructure to do so. And that was sort of a leverage point for us in our community benefit agreement to say, we want to work with a developer who has some of the same ethos as our community. So that's the connection point, but we do not actually have jurisdiction, or should I say permitting authority over the project.
Thanks. Mike,
Okay,
you had
thanks.
another question?
Yeah, I'm just curious for all three folks. These are great presentations. Thank you very much. But for community benefits, how do you actually arrive at an upper limit? Think of the permanent fund up in Alaska, where the oil industry pays out money every year based upon production. And does that ever come into a consideration, that the benefit, the economic benefit provided for the people using the project, that they pay into an ongoing fund based upon that profit? And this just gets to, how do you deal with cost overruns of like, say, I'm going to build you a community center, I'm going to spend $1 million, and then when you build it, it actually costs $1.5 million. And then there's operations and maintenance. I'm just trying to get at like how the upper end is actually determined, and is there an open-ended model that continues benefits to the community as long as the project provides benefits to the contractors? I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. Does anybody want to take that on? Omar, Ben, or Scott?
At least in regard to our project, I mean, this is sort of a preliminary community development benefit agreement. I was really sort of like helping leverage a company, again, that had our similar ethos. But ultimately, if whoever wins a lease site is going to need to connect with us, we imagine there would be another agreement that would sort of lock in that ongoing revenue stream to the community, which we desperately need for our waterfront and for our harbor and fishing operations in the city. But I think it's ultimately a negotiation to determine what that upper limit is. And I think as Ben and Omar have done much better than me, and I think probably have better examples than our project for this, the Delta project, but is building a big enough coalition to make sure you're asking for the right amount. If it's a small coalition, it's probably going to be a smaller amount. So that's just sort of my take on that.
Omar or Ben, upper limits?
Yeah, so I can talk from the perspective of how the first two negotiations we did before the community benefits agreement. We took the resources that we negotiated, we endowed them so that we have perpetual impact. So every year we pulled the interest off of those endowments and we build affordable housing. We pay for scholarships for graduating high school seniors. We pay for workforce development scholarships for our adults. We do youth programs and senior programs. So we pull the interest. We have 9 endowments. So we pull the interest off of those endowments, and we do various type of mitigating projects in the community that improves their quality of life.
Thanks, that's helpful. Ben, anything you need to add?
Sure, I love this question. We've seen community benefits agreements that, on the one hand, just say what the developer or project owner's minimal contribution towards something needs to be, and we've also seen agreements that say that the project owner or developer has to cause this thing to come into existence, like sort of, even if it, sort of regardless of the cost. So, and I think part of the, one thing I like about community benefits agreements is their flexibility and uniqueness in each case. So, and as I said earlier, I don't think anyone negotiating anything like this should be bound by precedent in any way. That's sort of the whole point from my perspective, is that it's the tool is designed to meet the needs of the moment and the project. And so, but specifically again to your question, I've seen sort of both models, and I think in the Alaska example is very interesting to explore. And I think one further area of discussion around community benefits right now is things like which wouldn't necessarily apply here, but it's a similar concept to the Alaska one, which is sort of like ongoing revenue sharing. Okay, this project's generating X in revenue. Is there sort of a community fund that's just getting a percentage off the top? So if the project does well and the community does well, things like that. So that's certainly a part of discussion right now in the community benefits field.
Thanks. So I have in the queue Bill Wells, Tom Schlosser, Jim Wallace, and Anna Swenson is back in the queue. So Jim Wells, do you want to unmute yourself? And
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Again, my name is Bill Wells. I'm with the California Delta Chambers and Visitors Bureau. We've been fighting this project in one form or another for the last 15 years. I think you're at about $1 billion into it, but I'm not sure because Department of Water Resources is fairly secret about it. This would be the most destructive and expensive project in California history. There is no relation to building a warehouse in a residential neighborhood or building an offshore wind farm that compares to this. What you need to do is go talk to the people at Mono Lake and see how they did after the water was diverted going into there, or Buena Vista Lake, or go down to Owens Valley. They were actually Owens Dry Lake, and see what happened there when they diverted the water out of there. That's what this proposal is, to divert the Sacramento River around the Delta. It will destroy the Delta, not only the town of Hood, which will be totally destroyed, but many other towns and communities in the area. We've already had fishing problems because of the amount of water taken out of the river now, and property values have dropped. So there is literally, I see no benefit. There's no amount of community benefit that would satisfy any person in the Delta. And by the way, the Delta is 5 counties. It's not a community, it's a region. And the local governments of these 5 counties have got together and formed a Delta coalition to oppose this project because they know how destructive it is. So there's been a lot of money fighting this, and it will continue on. As Jerry Brown said, our former governor, that he'll do anything humanly possible to build this tunnel. Well, we'll do anything humanly possible to stop him. Thank you.
So, thank you, Bill. I just, oops, I'm not sure why there was an echo there. I just want to let people know that I work for Ag Innovations. And so I don't have any input into this. The reason I organized this workshop is because back in spring, many people said, what are community benefits agreements? What are they like? What do they do? Who has them? And so this is just to respond to that question. I am neither in favor or not in favor. What my responsibility is to help the stakeholders find the information that they need so that you can continue the advocacy that you want to continue for or against the project. So I just want to make that clear that we are taking notes, and we will produce a meeting summary. It will be on the website, but I don't want you to feel frustrated that that this is just about community benefits, because that's why I organized it, was just for community
thank
benefits.
you very much. Okay, going back, I guess about 2 years, I know in the stakeholder engagement committee, this community benefits thing started coming out, and I know they've compromised a few people there that are going along with it and think it's a good idea. But anyway, I appreciate it. I understand you're not involved, but again, I just like to say, everybody listening here, we will do anything possible to stop this project.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Bill. Okay, so Tom, you're next in the queue.
Hi, I hope you can hear me.
Yes, that's good.
I'm interested in which communities DCA is interested in negotiating community benefit agreements. In particular, the federally recognized Indian tribes around the Delta and within the Delta. Of course, tribal utilization of the Delta has changed over time as Indian people have been pushed away from a lot of the resources, but there still are significant Indian communities nearby. For example, Wilton Rancheria, Shingle Springs Band of Miwok Indians, Buena Vista. And so I'm interested in whether or not those communities should be approaching DCA about community benefits.
Tom, there's nobody on the phone at the moment who can answer that question for you. I'll write it down as a question that you have, and there's if there's any input that anybody has from the DCA on that question, or from the Department of Water Resources, it'll be on the website. But there's none of these people here. None of the presenters know about that. So, but I appreciate your question. We'll put it down and we'll see if we can get a response for you in some way.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. I had next in the queue, Jim Wallace. And
yeah,
then,
hi, Juliana. Thanks so much.
There's 2 other people in the queue. I see that Anna's in the queue, and there's a person whose telephone number is 925. So if I can't call on you a name, when I get to you, I'll just call on you by your telephone number. And then Kathleen is next in the queue after that. Thanks. Go ahead, Jim.
All right, thanks. So yeah, I live in the Delta and have been familiar with this project for a very long time and opposed to it and still am. But I understand that DWR has integrated the community benefit program into the CEQA process. So it is now sort of embedded in what we have to look at going forward. And I know that one of the stated objectives, if you will, of DWR has been that any Delta community can become involved in the community benefit process and does not have to endorse the project. As a matter of fact, we can still say publicly and privately, we still oppose the project, but the community benefit agreement process must move forward with communities in the Delta. And it's a process, it's not a finalized thing, nobody's selling out. I know some of my neighbors probably believe that that's what I'm doing, but that's not the case. My question really goes to the three panelists who have done a really great job tonight. Preconditions to sit down and negotiate with the developer, in this case, very, very large public agencies. This is sort of an inverse case where the folks who are being affected are private, the developer are public. And so I'm kind of curious as to whether or not you see any downside in going into these negotiations, if you will, with conditions. And one condition for us would be, we will not endorse the project, we will not approve the project, and but that should not mean that we should not sit down and have meaningful negotiations with the project proponents. Thanks.
Thanks. Interesting question. Ben, Omar, Scott, either one of you want to jump in? The sort of lots of private parties negotiating with large public agencies.
Yeah, I don't know if this example is not meant to be equivalent, kind of compared to your situation, which is vastly different, and the scale is massive. And definitely this is educational for me to understand how long it's been going and the real significant concern. But we had a wastewater project that we've been trying to build in our community for 15 years. And we're a small community of 10,000 people, and you know, just a lot of discussion to figure out how to do this in a way that doesn't impact the community, or least impact. But similar conversations with folks who are very vehemently opposed to doing anything because of the cost, mostly, that would be borne upon their rates. But I think there was still value in having conversations with those individuals and the groups to help understand their concerns, understanding they would never support the project. And that wasn't the goal. The goal wasn't to convince them. The goal was to figure out how best to mitigate the impacts, because ultimately, most likely was going to move forward, and we all still need to be neighbors. We still need to be involved with each other's lives because we're a small community. So the bigger value there was really just trying to help mitigate the impacts, and we didn't ask for their support of the project. That wasn't the goal. So I think that is an important condition. I imagine the public agency would be on board with that. They should be, in my opinion, but I'm not supposed to offer my opinions. So, thanks.
Omar or Ben? Lots of private parties negotiating with large public agencies.
I agree with Scott. I mean, Scott answered that question well.
Thanks. Ben, anything you want to add?
At this time, yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Thanks. Anna, can I go to Kathleen and the person on the phone and then come back to you? No, you want to go now? Go for
Sure.
it.
No, it's fine. You can go to
All
them. That's really fine.
I just want to make sure they get in their question in, but you are in the queue. I won't forget.
Absolutely.
So,
Thank you.
Kathleen, you're next in the queue. Can you unmute yourself? Kathleen?
Unmute.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you hear me now?
Yes, we do. Yes, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, my question is just simple, and maybe I missed something. Is the drought ever discussed in this, that we are having a drought in the last I heard? And how are droughts handled in this situation?
Unfortunately, I work for Ag Innovations. I'm a facilitator mediator, and neither Ben nor Omar nor Scott have any information on community benefits address situation to droughts. So as I did with some of the other participants, I'll note that was a question about how drought affects community benefits and the Delta conveyance. And if there's any response, if there's anything that anybody from DCA or DWR can answer, I'll make sure it's on the website. Is that okay?
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. The next person on who we want to unmute has the telephone number. Oops, we lost him. It was a 915 number. Nope. Put their hand down. Okay, Anna, you're next.
Okay, thank you. First thing I want to say is it is not a good idea to try to split communities and regions to basically bid against each other for the benefit of a project that does not benefit anyone in Northern California. Two, what I want to say is that we should be spending our money on infrastructure, such as improving the aqueduct to stop it from losing 30% due to evaporation and due leakage. And three, how on earth do we get a group like DWR who has no history of following through with community benefit programs? How are we supposed to be reassured that this time, they will do the right thing and follow through? Because we know about cost overruns. We know about all of the things that can happen that can interfere with the community benefit fundage, right? We know that those things happen. We know that DWR is at this point, appears to be incapable of following through with their promises when it comes to community benefit. We also know that they are not good stewards of our infrastructure, such as Oroville Dam. So in this situation, you guys had the privilege of dealing with or entities and organizations that did follow through, that did do a good job, that did follow through for your communities. But we have yet to have one instance where we can be shown that what they say is what they will do. And I do not like the idea, and I will not support anything that tries to pit farmer against farmer. And that's what this is in this water grab. They're trying to pit the people against the people when the real enemy is DWR, who's going forward with a project that literally the plan is as old as I am, back from the peripheral canal days. This is not a good project for California. This is definitely not a good project for Northern California or the Delta. And how do we as a people be instilled with the idea that DWR will actually follow through and do what they say when they have no history of doing that in any of the other projects? Pyramid Lake, Mono Lake, any of the other things that have happened in the past, how do we know?
Thanks, Anna. So, and we've heard this concern since I started interviewing people back in December. So how do you negotiate with a party or parties that you feel are not accountable? What can you put into the negotiations or into the organizing or into eventually an agreement that makes you feel that actually the thing that you agree on will actually happen? Let me start with you, Ben, and then come to Omar. How do you make that really happen when you don't even trust the parties, the implementing agencies?
Yeah, I mean, I think I touched on this earlier in the presentation when we talk about sort of the principle of accountability and what we think of makes for an effective community benefits agreement, and that is one that contains clear, specific, measurable, and legally enforceable terms. The coalitions that we work with are often negotiating with large private developers whom they don't trust, and that's why they're negotiating community benefits agreements with them, is so that because they themselves are in a similar situation where development projects have arrived in their communities time and time and time again with the promise of jobs, with the promise of this and that, and it has not come to pass, and so they're interested in entering into legally binding agreements that ensure that those things come to pass. It's another reason why the community benefits agreement tool was invented in the first place, was to get beyond, to sort of make real at last these promises that often come with big development projects. So that's what I would say is that the CBA is done properly and in a way that again is clear, specific, measurable, and legally enforceable, can provide a tool for distrusting parties. But I don't want to offer any type of specific advice for this situation. I'm just sort of telling the story about what has happened in these other communities and tools that have worked in that regard.
Thanks.
So.
Omar, how did you make sure that a developer who you may not have trusted would actually fulfill the promises that they were talking about?
It was one of the reasons why we wanted to work with a lawyer. Once we hammered out the details of what everyone agreed to, it was the job of the lawyer then to put the legal framework together with the actual document. Second, we have an oversight, a kind of committee or a group, and that group is LAMC. All the agreements that we negotiate on behalf of our communities, LAMC is the oversight group. And we have quarterly check-ins with each of the groups that we have agreements with, ensuring that they are meeting the mitigation agreements that we have, as well as the CBA agreement, that they're meeting those requirements and those expectations of the agreements that we have in place. So we do have
Thanks.
that oversight committee.
Thanks, that was helpful. That was one of the questions I was thinking about asking, so that you, in the agreement, you come up with some sort of measuring, monitoring, evaluation tools, and how will we know if this is working? So there's one more person in the queue, and then I want to thank you all for participating. The person whose number is 925, etc. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question? Your telephone number is 925-584. Yep, there we go. Golly, he keeps raising his hand. I call him and then he goes away. So thanks so much. If you want to go to the next, oh, Mike, you get the last question then, since we've lost whoever 925 is. Yeah, Mike.
All right, thanks. Sorry to 925. Hope I get a chance to ask our question sometime. Hey, I was just curious, especially for Omar and Ben, who pays for your services? So if you're organizing with a group to negotiate or codify agreements and things like that, where does that funding come from for the group? Who would a community, how would a community get their funding to pay for your services?
So for the LAMC organization, we do not charge community groups for the services we provide. We support those services through grants. And then LAMC has an operational endowment that we can pull those funding from to support communities' opposition against projects and mitigation or development of community benefits agreements. So we do not charge our community organizations for these services.
Thanks, Omar. Ben.
Yeah, similarly, I mean, we're a nonprofit organization. We receive charitable support from a range of sources, including foundations and others. And we principally work with the network of grassroots affiliates that I described at the beginning, who are also nonprofit organizations supported like Omar's group from a variety of sources. So that's generally how we work.
So the next steps, and is that 925?
I think I'm 925.
Okay. Oh, golly, you get the last question. Thank you.
I'm sorry about that. I tried to go through Zoom, but it denied me, and it's the first time I've ever done this on a cell phone, so I apologize. I just wanted to say to everybody there, you did a really good presentation, and thank you very much. I don't think anybody really has any questions on what it is that you were trying to put out there. I have one question, and then I'm wondering if you could maybe pass it along. I've been asking it over and over for about 2 years now, and I've never been able to get a response as the DWR. And I realize that you don't work for the DWR, but how come this has to be a tunnel? Why can't it just be a pipeline? Seems like it would not destroy the town good.
All right.
Anyway,
I will, I'll put that forward to the Department of Water Resources. What's the benefit of a tunnel versus a pipeline or other conveyance like that? So I will put that forward.
Why does it have to be buried 150 feet under the ground?
Yeah.
Anyway, that was that question. I don't know that you're going to get anything back from the DWR, and I'm sorry that you had the people that you had call in there. They're probably some of the most timid here against the Delta,
That's
but
okay.
they were the ones that responded. But I too will fight it with every every bit of my body, and I will be arrested the day that they break ground on it. So
Okay,
thank
thanks
you
so
very
much.
much for being here.
Thank you. All right, so the next steps, I just want to give people sort of the heads up. The next step is the environmental information, the environmental impact report will come out sometime like late spring. At Ag Innovations, we're responsible for the environmental justice outreach, so we'll make sure that people know it's going to be in 3 weeks, a week, or whatever. We'll let people know. We will be working with the environmental justice communities over the winter to find out what is an environmental impact report, how do you comment on one, how do you read it, that sort of thing. And then we'll let people know when it comes out. For the next steps for the community benefits framework is we're in the steps now. We've done the community workshops, we've done the case study workshops, and we've done 2 tribal workshops. So now we're in this informal step of talking to people, and if people want to have meetings or if people want to send us recommendations, but there's nothing that needs to happen at the moment. And many people have told me that it doesn't make sense to do much more until the environmental impact report comes out, and then you can see if the EIR is proposing that, then we have to propose this. So that's sort of there's no big immediate next step on the community benefits, but we will continue to engage with the community to hear what people suggest. As I said, the EIR comes out after that, and we'll let people know about that, as well as the DWR, of course, will let people know about that. Thank you all for participating. As I said earlier, any information is on the DWR website. You'll see the agenda for this meeting, the presentation slides for this meeting, and then you'll see as soon as possible the audio of the video, and then a meeting summary for this. And we've been putting together frequently asked questions. So the questions that people have proposed, I'll forward those onto the DWR as a frequently asked questions. I thank you very much for your participation. It was really useful for me, and I hope it was helpful for you all. Thanks so much, and good night.